Yes, live. Nice one. There we go. Hello, hello, hello. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to VUX World, the penultimate VUX World for 2022. So, Merry Christmas to you all if you are wrapping up this week. Excited, very much excited today for a conversation with Jim-Rowe Bot. And I'm changing my name today to Kane-versational AI. So, it's Kane-versational AI and Jim-Rowe Bot. Jim, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. I'm really a big fan. I'm loving what you're doing. I follow you on LinkedIn. I see all your posts and content. It's really good stuff. So thank you for spending the time with us.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate that. There's a lot of people creating great content out there, and likewise, I watch all of your broadcasts and read your content. And yeah, we've got you've had a lot of them on your show. It's where I get majority of my information now, really, LinkedIn,
Mm,
and it's where I try to share my information so that more people can come into this industry.
mm. It's funny LinkedIn, isn't it? Because like I don't know whether it's having the same effect in other areas and with people with other interests in other industries and stuff like that. But for me, it's exactly the same. Like I get most of my information from LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn more than any other social networking kind of platform.
Same.
And it just feels or seems as though everyone who's interested in conversational AI, customer experience automation, intelligent automation, digital transformation, all of those people seem to be spending more time on LinkedIn over the last sort of 5 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but when Microsoft purchased it, I was like head in my hands thinking, oh no, it's going to be ruined. But actually, I really like, on the whole, how it's changed. I still think LinkedIn events are an absolute nightmare to admin and set up and
Yeah.
analyze, and the data's quite poor. But in terms of, putting out ideas, especially text, I think works really, really well. Um,
Yeah.
there's no value in reactions. I'm sure you've realised that as well. But the value the reach increase you get from comments is phenomenal. Uh,
Yeah.
and I've got a friend who's a writer. He's a digital nomad and he's been writing, traveling the world for the last 7 years. And I recently kind of pushed him towards LinkedIn, and it's working wonders for him and his brand.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, they've introduced some good stuff recently. I think the live LinkedIn Live's been good. I think they could promote the live streams better
Yeah,
because in my what I've noticed is, and this is just from being a kind of consumer of other people's live stuff, I get it in my notification feed, but I very rarely see it on my actual news feed.
correct.
And so I think more people would probably watch it if they had the opportunity to see it in the news feed and get a sample of it. Whereas when it just comes in your notification sort of list, it's very easy to just skip over it and ignore
I
it.
think it is
Um,
for the likes of us because we get so many notifications. Uh,
yeah,
but if you've registered for it, then it should perhaps sit in the last hour before the event goes live at the top of your feed.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
so
That
it's
yeah,
just there, so we get more viewers,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, yeah. They're try You can see they're trying to kind of make it into more of a platform where people stick around on it.
Yeah.
Whereas like before, and same thing with Twitter in the early days, it was like you'd go there to get links to somewhere else.
Yes.
Whereas LinkedIn seems to be trying to do a good job of. I mean, it's doing all right. You know, the newsletter does well, the broadcasts do okay, the posts, organic reach for posts is still pretty good on LinkedIn.
I
You
think
know,
it's
so it's
fantastic. Yeah, it took a bit of
yeah.
a hit middle of this year, but then basically you learn to work with the algorithm. You know this.
Mm, mm,
Whereas reactions, first part of this year, reactions did really, really well to give you organic reach. It just middle of the year, it just the bottom fell out of it. It
mm,
really does um, advance you to be consistent with your posting, and you know that as well. If you're
mm, mm,
consistent, then you get really good reach. I've been quiet for the last couple of weeks, so I know my reach when I start posting again is going to be
mm.
pitiful. But as soon
Yeah.
as you get back consistent and they know you're posting consistent, you start getting that organic reach again. It's pretty fantastic.
Mm. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Nice. So yeah. So well, yeah. As I said, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. So, I called this "Lessons from Designing Over 300 Bots." I haven't made that stat up, have I? I'm pretty sure you told me that you've worked on over 300 bots before.
Probably, yeah, well over that now. I stopped counting.
Interesting. So when did you start working in with chatbots and conversational AI?
So it would have been 2017. Um, I don't know if my route was non-traditional or not, or if there isn't a traditional route conversational AI hasn't been around for 30 years. But yeah, I was working in a startup, and we needed a way to educate people about the product that we were selling. Messenger bots had just started to become a thing. So I went out and tried a few of the basic messenger bot platforms, settled on one, built this bot to sell this product, and it did amazingly well. And I mean really high engagement. That was the first time I ever built a bot, made loads of mistakes, learned how to write conversationally. And then I was hooked. From that moment on, I was absolutely hooked. And this was at the very low end messenger end,
Mm.
so you haven't got any of the fancy stuff. And then I'm an incessant reader anyway, so I just started reading and just getting every book I could find on linguistics and conversational AI and chatbots and AI in general. I was just consuming all the time. And I just started building bots, literally not for money, just I would look at a niche. I'd find 5 websites in that niche. I would analyze their websites, get an idea of the company, their culture, their voice, and I would just make a bot, not even show it to anybody. And I was just bang, bang, learning it, putting in the hours basically.
Mm.
And then after that, I started reaching out to small businesses at the start, and building bots for anybody that would take one. Uh,
Mm.
so I went through the rough and smooth, working with small businesses, they will hang you over the hot coals if they don't like what you've
Mm.
done.
Mm.
And somehow I think big businesses give you a bit more leeway sometimes. So I learned the hard way, made lots of mistakes, had lots of success, and then realized that I really wanted to do the big, fat, juicy projects. The
Mm.
ones where it's having thousands and thousands of conversations a day, and kind of just almost manifested that, structured my LinkedIn, started creating content, and it happened naturally. Not naturally, I
Mm.
made it happen basically.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Nice, interesting. So you mentioned there that you mentioned a couple of times you made a lot of mistakes.
Oh,
What mistakes in particular can you remember that you think were kind of really good teaching moments?
the biggest one, and I still see people do this now, is they basically try to take the content of the business website and turn it into a conversational agent, and
Mm.
it is bloody awful. It's totally the wrong approach. My first 50 chatbots were probably built that way, until I
Mm.
realized that that is just an awful customer experience. It doesn't really add any value. Then I came up with this concept of the MVB, minimum viable bot, and started to take this totally different approach. Whereas what we're looking for is one or two really big problems to solve, and how the conversational AI could have an impact, show some value, and then start to expand out, that kind of iterative approach.
Mm.
And that's kind of the system I've used, which has served me very well. It's meant I've worked with across lots of different niches. I've tried not to tie myself down to a niche,
Mm.
because I want to keep it interesting.
Mm. Interesting. So taking website content, just basically repurposing, and you can tell when chatbots have done that because you get served about 3 different speech bubbles worth of
Right.
rubbish, and you have to kind of like the worst ones are the ones where you have to actually scroll up a little bit to get to the
Oh,
first part of it all.
yeah.
uh, so what are some of the other things then? Do you think that you either kind of thought I won't do that again, or even things maybe that you observe today, mistakes maybe that still happen, as you said, that you learnt sort of way back how to avoid?
So a couple of things I see, and I made these mistakes as well, is trying to solve every customer's every problem. So going too wide too soon. Uh,
Mm.
when you analyze, if you've got some good conversation data anyway, across CRMs, email, SMS, whatever it is, if you've got some data, you can do some pretty good analysis and make some fairly good assumptions about where you can have the biggest impact with your MVB. Sometimes you don't have that, and you have to take some guesses, and this is part of the reason I like the iterative kind of approach. But
Mm.
yeah, trying to solve every customer's every problem with the bot, when actually if you can just take 15, 20% of customer queries that don't then have to end up in the inbox of a human or on live chat for a human, you're doing a good job. And then
Mm,
it's just an iterative approach from there. Um, if your only reason to have a chatbot is to, you know, keep customers away from your people, then there's the wrong reasons, I think.
definitely. It seems to be the first thing that some companies try is that though, which is like let's just do this and we'll try and either prevent people from getting through to an agent if they call,
Yeah,
or we know that the website leads to contact, so let's just do something on the website.
yeah,
And it's like using. I always find it funny where people use website content to build a chatbot,
yeah,
and it's like the content's on your website.
exactly. Yeah, it's already there.
What's
What's the
it
point?
doing in your chatbot? Yeah, just
Yeah,
stick it in make sure your search is working well, or like you review your information architecture or your SEO or something like that. Like it's already there.
yeah. For me, the two biggest reasons to implement conversational AI is to be available 24/7 and to be where the customer wants to be serviced. If that's the two big drivers for me. And then after that becomes all the, reducing operational overheads and everything else, and learning from conversations, which obviously is important. But for me, those first two are the really important reasons. It does depend on what you're trying to do with the chatbot. I've recently started working with franchises. It's a niche. It's a niche I've wanted to work with for a long time,
Mm,
and I've done some for franchise gyms, which was really interesting challenge. I don't know if you know, but these franchise gyms, their biggest challenge is to get people across the threshold of the gym, potential members, and they
right.
do all sorts of initiatives to get people across that threshold. So really, all the chatbot needs to do is get people across the threshold. Because once you
Mm,
get across the threshold, then there's people that know that gym, work in that gym, friendly faces, healthy looking fitness professionals who can then, do the convincing, do the sales.
mm,
So I think in the world of um, franchise, chatbots could be quite unique. I'm actually working in with another franchise at the moment in the care sector for the UK. So they've got, I think, 30 sites across the country at the moment,
mm,
which brings its own challenges. Because if you imagine you've got 30 sites all having conversations, all with their own NLP, with the current platform they're on, and I'm trying to work
mm,
with the platform now to make a global NLP. So
mm.
you've got local conversational uh, and intent for each site, but then you've also got kind of global intent. Something
Mm.
we're working on at the moment. It's quite fascinating. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, interesting. So with the franchises, I'm assuming you're working at the kind of the franchise level, not
Yeah.
necessarily individual franchisees.
So I've done both, and
Yeah,
I've learned the hard way that you need to be working at the head office level,
yeah,
really, um, because there's a lot. Otherwise, you get a lack of consistency across. But brand is very important with franchises. If you look at the top 10 franchises, it's your KFC, your McDonald's, your Hertz Car Rentals, all of them. It's big, strong brands, and
mm,
franchises very brand uh, focused. Even if it's something like, I don't know, window screen repair, or the AA, for instance, whatever it might be. Brand
mm,
is really powerful, and the voice needs to be the same across. It should be. They should all be working off the same system. It's
yeah,
a franchise is a system of operating, so it
yeah,
makes total sense that it's one voice across all of the franchises with slight localization and personalization. So, not much in terms. I did think about this about kind of a Midlands voice, a Northern voice, a Southern voice, but actually you're overthinking it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's similarities with franchises to kind of like global, not even global enterprises, but like I suppose if you look at any sort of large enterprise, they've got lots of different teams. Lots of those teams end up kind of like building their own instances of various types of bots, often on different platforms. And so there's inconsistencies there. You would think that at least with one company, it would be easier to get some consistency, but it doesn't seem to go that way. And then you go to the kind of global level, and
Mm.
obviously you've got language support to deal with, but you've still got lots of companies that are doing, their own. Every market's got their own tools. Some markets have got multiple tools. There's no consistency with the persona. I suppose Vodafone's Toby. You could draw a
Yeah, I was
distinction
just
there
about to
because that,
say, what about
yeah,
Vodafone? Because I
yeah,
don't know if you
that's the only
remember.
consistent.
I don't know if you remember when they first launched their conversational AI. It was awful. But now I look at the New Zealand version, which is really good. Can't remember what
Yeah.
theirs is called. It's got like a Maori name,
Yeah,
and I think there's a South America version. There's obviously the UK European version. I think they're
yeah,
doing good stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They are. Yeah, yeah. They've had a lot of experience as well.
yeah,
Um. So, and it's one of those things where there's not actually that many examples in Europe and the UK of sort of like notable personalities in the chat. You go to America, you've got Eno, you've got Erica, Alexa, and Siri stem from the US,
yeah,
and you've got these kind of like almost like not quite iconic. I wouldn't necessarily call Erica iconic, but it's definitely something that a lot of people, certainly in this industry, know about. Whereas in the UK, there isn't quite so much of that, or in Europe, there's not quite so much of that. There's like Vodafone's Toby, Love Holidays Sandy, but I wouldn't necessarily say that Sandy is that well known, to be completely honest.
uh,
And so it's like, yeah, I don't know why that is. There doesn't seem to be as much focus on the sort of making it a branded experience, so to
yeah.
speak.
It's interesting. I was speaking to or one of the entrepreneurs kind of online networking events. I was speaking in the conversational design room, and there's some people there from the South Americas, and they were saying how in South America they're very personality driven. Their bots, very
Mm,
name focused. They have really strong personalities, and it's a cultural thing apparently.
interesting.
And they play around with male versus female and abrupt versus soft, and whole different culture. It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Obviously, I think in the UK and Europe, a lot of companies have kind of just tried to get some stuff out the door, and it's been like, let's just try and get this thing done, uh, rather than sort of make a branding effort. I think we'll see more of it though. I think we'll definitely see that. I know that like NatWest and all that lot have got like, is it Cora or something like that? They've all kind of got their version. It's just not quite seemingly as, I suppose, promoted, for want of a better phrase, as some of the others. But
Yeah,
I think we'll definitely see personality being.
I think often they're not confident in their
Yeah,
tool yet to really push it hard.
yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah. Um, so thinking about some of those sort of iconic bots, then assistants like Toby, like Erica, like Eno, and the ones that you've worked on, what do you think that sort of like? We spoke a little bit about some mistakes and stuff like that. What do you think that good assistants have in common?
Um, they're very focused on what they can do, as in they will do a handful of things really, really well, and with some depth.
Mm,
So whether that's you know helping you reset your password, helping you recover a registration email and get it resent, whatever it is, they do that one thing almost
mm,
seamlessly,
mm,
effortlessly, with the least amount of input from the customer, but they just make it happen. Because
mm-hmm,
why does anybody go to a chatbot? Because they can't be they can't be putting up with hassle. They just it's almost like they just want to hand over the problem and get it solved,
mm,
which is why I go to chatbots. Um, so when a chatbot can just take that little problem that 20% of calls are all about, if they can take that, I recently had this a brand approach me. I never worked with them actually, but they had one problem, which is 40% of their communication was asking where their order was.
mm,
So if they could automate that 40%, it was a massive saving. And they were
mm,
having like thousands of those questions every day. So just to be able to answer that seamlessly by just being able to interrogate their system, give an update of whether the order's been sent or not, if it's been held for any reason, whatever it might be, well, it would just make their life so much easier. But if you could do that one thing really, really well, people would be impressed and they'd feel serviced.
Yeah, it seems it sounds. I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds as though you're a fan of taking the kind of, I call it the sort of bottom up approach, which is build something that serves a purpose in a very specific use case for a very specific use case, and then expand that to the next use case, then the next use case, then the next use case, and then eventually, when you've got enough coverage around your use cases, you can have that kind of front end, which is how can I help you.
Yes.
The other kind of approach is that you first begin building a kind of a shallow but wide experience, which is mainly all about routing. You might fit in some kind of like FAQ stuff in there, but it's predominantly about routing you to the right place, which is beginning with how can I help you,
Yes.
figuring out what that customer intent is, using that language model in the first instance just to route them to a human, and then starting to pick off the use cases that you can automate entirely. Do you subscribe to the former? Am I reading that right, reading
Right.
between the lines, or not?
I've done both. And it all depends on the client you're working with, I think. It depends how open they are, how quickly they want to see results, how big of an investment they have. So there's lots of ins and outs, and there's a lot going on around the project team and their personality, their attitude to risk. That's a biggie. You know, some people like to see a little use case, and I had this recently. I was partnering with another communications business, and this was with a franchise, like a UK national high street brand, and they were not fully convinced, so they were doing like this single use case, which would solve a huge problem for them. But as we were developing that solution, they were already picking other ideas for other solutions, and they were all starting to go into a list. So both approaches are valid, but it all depends on who you're working with and their attitude, really. And sometimes, these companies will have their own project management internal team and style. So they will do things a certain way, and I'll work with them, offering support, but support their project team and how they work. That can be a real challenge. Personally, I prefer when I'm the project manager, to be honest. It just makes my life, things move quicker, and it makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah. Plus, if you've done it a number of times before, then
Yeah.
risk management becomes a lot easier because you're spotting things well before they actually happen.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that there's lots of product owners, product managers who, I mean, I found it interesting. I was speaking to someone the other week who their team that they have, it's a fairly sizable bank. Their team is full of people who are not necessarily that bothered about conversational AI. Like, it's just a project team that's being put together to do this thing,
Yeah.
and I found that really interesting.
It's not
Say
unusual.
again?
That's really
Yeah.
not unusual.
Well, it's fairly unusual for me because most of the teams that I've worked with have been like they really like this stuff. They're on LinkedIn. They're kind of really part of the community. They're really sort of up for it. And very few times have I kind of worked with a team that's like, this is John. He's an engineer. He doesn't give a shit about natural language understanding, and he's just there to do. But maybe it's on the API side, yes. But in terms of the core project team, most of what my experience has been people who are genuinely like really loving it, and so I found it interesting. So you've got then project managers who are not necessarily, experienced with conversational AI,
Yeah.
don't really understand. I don't suppose. I mean, they'll understand how to manage a project, but like what should be done when, how long should things take, who
Yeah.
needs to be involved, what risks can occur. It's like it's a very difficult job. So yeah, I don't know if you've kind of experienced the same sort of thing where, certainly from a project management point of view, there are some differences, is there not, with conversational AI projects?
I think because of the way I position myself, I'm actually attracting the teams that have got little interest, or the project's already failing, or the managing director normally has no confidence that the team can deliver a product. So
Mm.
I'm bought in, I think, partly because of my energy and my passion and my ability to get everybody excited about the project. And that's why I like to be the project manager, because then I can jimmy people along. I can dictate the
Mm.
timelines and stop people, stop the scope creep and stop people. It's really nice when you're outside of an organization because you can be a little bit brutal, and
Mm.
you can have your stakeholders and you can say, we're going to go off track here very, very soon. We're going to start missing dates because that team are not delivering, or
Mm.
that person is just not right for the team. They're having too much time out of the office. They miss their every single deadline. And sometimes being outside of an organization, you can get away with a lot more because you're outside of the politics.
Yeah.
And it enables me to keep a project on track. And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the skills of a good project manager, certainly an agile project manager, where, and especially if you're working with a team that is not too experienced with agile practices.
Yeah.
Some of the best scrum masters I've worked with have been absolutely brutal. And funnily enough, they have been external. People who are not associated to with the company don't really understand the company's culture, which I actually think is important because
Yeah.
you don't want to necessarily mold with the culture because it might be the culture that's part of the problem. And so, yeah, some of the best scrum masters that I've worked with and met have been absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
And you need to though. You need to, don't you?
You do, because you're hired to do a job, and if there's people within the team that are preventing you from doing that job, you're not there to be their friend. You're there
Mm,
to deliver on what you promised to deliver, and you're being paid handsomely for that promise. So, when you're external, the only thing you've got is your reputation, and
mm,
I won't let anything damage that
mm,
because it's taken me a long time to build up my reputation.
absolutely. So, what's your kind of preferred methodology around project managing a kind of a conversational AI project? You've got the agile house, which is, let's kind of do this incrementally, build something shippable, get that out the door, iterate and improve on that, and then add the next increment in the next sprint or so, and kind of keep rolling with it. Whether you decide to put it live or not is entirely up to you, but kind of the idea being that you work on incremental bits of value versus the other side of the house, which I think a lot of companies have this intuitively built into their culture, which is the waterfall style, which is let's just build the whole thing and then let's just ship it and see what happens.
I'm very much agile. I think whenever you're building something that is as impactful or potentially impactful as conversational AI, which can reach across the whole company and can have a huge positive or negative impact on customers, I think you need, personally, I think it's an agile approach. The other, the waterfall approach makes me very nervous. And
Mm,
when I've taken that approach, because I've adopted however their project management style is, when I've taken that approach, I'm just incredibly nervous. I think, because you're always making assumptions in whatever project you do. You've never
mm,
got all the information. Often, when you're external, like I am, you don't know how valid the information is you're being fed, which can be a really, for instance, one thing I've realized really this year is I'd say only about 20% of the questions that I'm given to answer are actually even asked by customers. When
mm,
I say just give me a list of all the questions you get asked and
mm.
what your responses are, when the bot's been live for at least 6 months, I look and only 20% of those questions are ever being asked.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's consistent, 20 to 30%.
yeah,
So yeah, all that 80, 70% of time and effort has been effectively wasted when it could have been used a lot more practically. Um,
mm,
so yeah, I'm very much the agile, iterative approach. I think stakeholders. I like when you can launch something quickly, whilst people have still got high interest, and they're
mm,
not being, their attention is not being drawn elsewhere, and you show an instant impact, and then
Mm.
you build up a lot of goodwill, and then you've got a bit more buy-in, and then you deliver the second element, and then you prove that 12 weeks later, look at the impact this small change made. Imagine if we did this over the next 18 months, and you just get
Mm.
better buy-in, I think, from stakeholders.
Mm. How do you approach those kind of stakeholders that, for many, especially if they're doing it for the first time, they've got one risk to manage, which is the fact that they're working with technology that they have no clue about really. And then they've got a second risk to manage, which is that the way in which we will deliver this new technology is going to be in a with a methodology and framework that we're not comfortable with or not used to.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of got two bits of newness to deal with. And so I've been involved. In fact, in more recent times, it's gone a lot better and it's been a lot easier. But in the early days, I found myself kind of involved with a lot of organizations that culturally didn't work in an agile way whatsoever,
Yeah.
and that viewed it as a really big risk to go live with something that in their mind was incomplete, as is exactly the same with any other type of technology. It was no different to
Of course.
anything I'd experienced prior with the web and stuff like that. So, have you got any kind of special kind of magic dust that helps in those conversations where you're dealing with cultures that are more akin or more comfortable with waterfall, and less averse, less experienced with agile?
Yeah, so my personal approach, and this might sound a bit weird, is I try to find within and potentially slightly outside of the project team a couple of really keen advocates internal to the organization. So people that are really excited and on my side, but also have influence, because
Mm,
you are an outsider,
mm,
and you can be the best salesperson and sell this to people, but if you can have a couple of people, couples better internally that are totally on board with you as the individual and
mm,
totally understand your vision and why you think agile is tried and tested approach and works every time. If you can get them on board, then they will help you convince the people that are not on board. Because it's really hard when you're outside. That's really,
mm,
really difficult. You need a couple of good advocates,
mm.
because there's
I
going to be
suppose
conversations going on that you're totally unaware of.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the other thing that's challenging from the outside is that often, so when I was working in government digital transformation, one of the things that I did, one of the first things I did change from where the company was made sure that the team that we needed to work on a project was relieved of duties to work on the project, to the
Oh,
point where we had, so my team was predominantly delivering, but then we had subject matter experts that we needed access to. And it was like a rule that we managed to get the board to buy into, which is that we absolutely have to have this person 30% of their time, for argument's sake.
yeah,
And thankfully I was kind of new, so they said okay, well let's try it. And so what it ended up being is that I almost created, like, I used to call it like an incubation chamber as such, which is that this team was just disconnected from the rest of the organization, but it's there to solve a very specific problem. We pulled in people from the organization that we needed to do it, but it just meant that we were kind of insulated and we could just get on with it. And what we found is that things were delivered on time, and things, broadly speaking, went really well. Sometimes there was external parties that we were reliant on, third party suppliers, stuff like that, that scuppered things. But by and large, for the stuff that we can control, it kind of worked. Then you go to being an outsider, completely independent, no influence really, influence, but no authority over the business that you're working with,
yeah,
no authority over the project team, and all that project team have got other jobs to do.
yes.
And so can it be a challenge, or I wonder if you can explain a bit about how you perceive this challenge, and what you can do to sort of remedy it, where you're on the outside with influence but no authority in terms of
Correct.
managing the project.
Yeah. So I think it's critical that when you start the project, that is high up as a risk. So
Mm,
that is kind of top right. It's high risk, high impact on the validity of the project. So straight from day one, they understand that that's a potential issue. Yes, you're an expert, you're a subject matter expert, you've done this kind of work before, but internally people don't know you, don't trust you, potentially aren't bumped into the project. And let's be honest, and I was the same when I used to work. I don't know if you knew this from my history, but I used to work in the IT department of a housing association. So I
Right.
used to work a lot with local government.
Mm.
And whenever we did projects, their day job came first, the project always came second.
Yeah.
And that had a massive detrimental effect on projects. So for me, it's kept, it's part of the risk log. I'm very much of that old Prince 2. I'm a Prince 2 project manager, so I always kind of go back to that. So I keep a risk log. I actually use Monday.com as my project management
Yeah.
suite, and I give
Nice.
my clients access to it. Sometimes I have to use their product, which if I have to, I have to. But if I'm project managing it, they're using Monday.com. I provide the licenses. It just makes my life so much easier. And when I give my weekly update on what went well, what didn't go well, if the risks, if that risk is getting tougher, higher, then I tell them, and I just keep chopping away at it, and I just say
Mm.
this is a high risk, it's not getting resolved, and I ask them a question: what can we do to solve it? I don't always give them the solution,
Mm.
but that's part of the joy of project management. It can't all be easy.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What about the people that think that so like Prince 2 is very much about kind of like everything's kind of planned, everything's documented, a lot of very documentation heavy Prince
It
2, isn't
is.
it? Um, Agile, I mean, people think that Agile's very light on documentation, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, everything should have a definition of done. You should scope everything that you build in.
Yes.
Everything should be prioritized accordingly. There should still be a risk log. It's like it's not that there isn't any documentation. It's just that the people's external perceptions of what Agile is, I think, is a little bit distorted. Have you observed that as well? Being that people just think that Agile is just flying by the seat of your pants and there's no real
Exactly that.
control.
That's why they see agile as high risk. But I'm very clear from the outset about, you're going to get a weekly update every week, which will include what was planned, what was achieved, what was outstanding, updated risk log, and any other things that need to be taken into consideration. Oh, decisions log, again, Prince 2.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, yeah, I'm very clear from the outset that kind of core documentation. I like Monday.com because I can build it the way I want it. I can keep all the documentation in one place. And it's very clear because it links out to calendars what needs to be done and when. So there's no
Mm.
confusion. There's no, oh, I didn't realize that task had been assigned to me. They bloody know. And it cuts down on email. I bloody hate email.
Yeah.
Trying to run a project with emails and threads and it's just too easy to go wrong. So whatever platform you like, as long as it enables you to work efficiently. And that's the other thing when you're external and managing a project. If you let other people dictate the pace and actions and deadlines and stuff like that, you end up losing money as an
Mm.
external resource because they're dragging things out. If I've said it's going to take 20 days of my time to deliver, the MVB up to this level, delivering these key deliverables, Prince 2 again. And people are interfering and stuff. It starts costing me money, and I'm not having that.
Mm. The other sort of part that I've found difficult with agile projects, not from not from the point of view of managing agile projects, but from the point of view of dealing with stakeholders that have no experience with agile. And we used to do training, and so in some cases we do still do that, actual training on agile project management
Yeah,
before a project starts, just to make everyone clear. And the main thing that is for, not the main thing, but one of the real important parts about that is that communicating to the stakeholders and the people funding this stuff that working in this way might appear as though it's a bit waterfall because you've got discovery time that's blocked out, you've got alpha time that's blocked out, you've got beta time that's blocked out, and you've got live kind of support for a while.
yeah,
And so it feels like it's waterfall, but all that this stuff means is that whatever gets done by the time that this time runs out is what gets done.
yeah,
And so the hardest part I've found people can't seem to wrap their head around is that at the end of that beta, what goes live might be everything that you can hope and wish for, but it might not. It
yes,
might be severely lacking in compared to what you expected it to be like,
yeah,
because that's the nature of the agile methodology, is that you build the most important stuff, and you ship the most important stuff. Whereas
Exactly.
people who are Waterfall are just used to having everything done. And so I found that to be the hardest part is the understanding that when it gets to the end, you might not get everything that you've wished for.
Yeah. So this is kind of where I go with this minimum viable bot thing. So again, it's a bit of a mixture of Waterfall and Agile, really. Don't
Mm,
think there's any way of getting away from it. Nobody's strict either way, but it's almost like this is what we want to achieve by the go live date. If we only get 70% done, we still go live.
yeah.
You know, these things, if these 7 out of the 10 bits are in place, we're still going to go live and we'll have the go, no go decision date. You
Hmm.
know, it would have been planned out that, you know, how live we're going, you know, because there is that as well. We might decide to go live just on the homepage or just on a social media, just on WhatsApp, for instance,
Mm,
whatever it might be, because that's the least used channel when, you know, they're a bit risk averse. Whereas I like to just get customers on it. I like to be there
mm,
ready in the morning, 9 o'clock, it's going live, and I'm sat on my laptop, bit nervous, bit excited, and it just goes live. And it's always a bit of a, yeah, oh, that went all right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's not groundbreaking at the MVP
Yeah.
stage,
Yeah.
but you know, from that moment, and I do tell people this, that moment your conversational AI starts having real customer conversations is where you start really learning. It's where you get the
Mm,
good, solid data.
mm,
I personally, you know, I've project managed. Oh, when I used to work in a housing association, I project managed everything from Christmas parties to fleet replacement. What else do I do? Office builds. Um, oh, anything and everything, and then all the IT stuff like moving from NetWare to Windows, and you know, I
mm,
did every type of project. So projects don't scare me anymore. I get really
mm,
excited, and because I keep a firm hold of my projects, firm control, I'm not nervous. I'm not really scared to go live. I'm
mm.
anxious, you know, because it's kind
Yeah.
of that nervous energy that another project's about to go live. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's the most exciting part for sure going live.
Yeah, I always say it's the beginning of the project. Like with
Yeah,
most other digital things, going live is the last thing you do,
yeah,
and then everyone goes home and goes to bed. You know what I mean? I've worked in project teams in the early days of building websites, and like they'd launch the website, and like for the first half hour of the website going live, we'd all be looking at real time Google Analytics, like
yeah,
what's new website design, what's happening,
yeah,
and then literally after that, the project team would be disbanded and everything would go back to normal. It's like we have no idea what this fucking website's doing.
yeah, yeah,
But with conversational AI, it is the stark opposite. It's like the faster you can get live, the better it is because the faster you learn, the faster you can make it actually work. And
exactly.
so it's like I think that's the best argument for agile is that like let's not waste time doing stuff that we have no idea whether it's going to add value. Let's just build what we believe based on our research is going to be the most valuable thing,
Yeah,
and then let's get it live and let's iterate it as fast as we can.
yeah,
It's like yeah. I don't
yeah.
know.
I feel I don't know about you, but I feel very privileged to work in this niche. It's
Mm,
exciting. You get to, I love educating people. So whenever I'm working with a project team, you know, I'm getting them excited about conversational AI. I'm sharing loads of my written content, past content with them because I've got a good library of content now. When they ask a question like, oh, they ask a question like, okay, so what should we choose as a name? You know, it's a silly little thing now for me,
mm,
but I'm like, oh, here you go. I've got this massive library now of like posts that other people have done, which actually
mm,
give advice on choosing your chatbot name and the pros and cons and all that. Or somebody will say about, well, okay, what about, you know, what do we need to consider in terms of brand? I'm like, I've
mm,
got just the place for you, and I'll send them off to somebody else's content or something I've written.
mm,
So I love the educational part of educating a team, and if I can leave them, you know, excited. I don't know about you, but I tend to work with customers really 1 to 2 years, maybe.
mm,
Yeah, so it's not just a quick fix. I tend to have the initial project, and then there's normally 3 to 6 months of kind of settling down and aftercare, and you
mm,
know, iterative changes in that time, but not like the big project. And
mm,
then there's normally a kind of let's pull together again, and then there's another push, another sprint. Right, this
Mm.
is what we've learned, and right. This is what we think we should do next. And they're often asking my advice. Do you think this is a good idea? Are we doing this too soon? Is this really going to help customers? Are we taking too big a risk? And then we come up with version two, which is what I'm doing with a client at the moment. We'll start version two of their conversational AI in January, and we have another big 3 month push. Whoa, really heavy
Mm.
into it. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm very privileged to do what I do.
It's a fantastic community as well. It's and it's such an interesting area that's developing rapidly. Um, what are some of those kind of you mentioned their resources for some people who are, a lot of people that listen to this are kind of practitioners and all that kind of stuff. So they probably are fairly aware. But like, what are some of the resources that you kind of tend to point people to, like books and stuff like that you would recommend people check out, people
Yeah,
should
so
follow and stuff?
if you're a book person, then that whole book list that I created on LinkedIn is just absolutely masterful. And that was interesting because I probably read 20% of those books, and
Mm.
some I wasn't even aware of. So when I asked the community, tell me your books and your authors and why you like the books, it just flooded in. So the content is there, and I'm just working my way through those. I'm an incessant reader.
Mm.
So, in fact, over this quiet kind of Christmas and New Year, I'll be downloading a few of those as audiobooks and blasting through them. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so I think
Nice.
books are great if that's the way you like to learn. I tell you where's lacking at the moment, and it's something I want to address next year, is YouTube.
Mm.
If you go and look for conversational AI content to learn, there's not a lot, and
Mm.
it's mostly sales driven by the
Yeah.
platform. It's their content.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
not a lot of independent content. That's something that I think needs addressing. Podcasts are
Mm.
becoming one of my sources now as well, obviously. I did actually reach out to the community, and I've been given a big list of podcasts. So
Mm.
first part of next year, I'm going to start listening to those, and then build up another list of useful podcasts for people to learn it. The joy
Mm.
with podcasts is you've got that back history, but you've
Yeah.
also always got new ideas and new content come in quickly. Whereas books don't really iterate, whereas
Yeah.
podcasts iterate. I don't know about you, but whenever I speak to people, they always change my minds about things that I almost thought were set in stone. That I talk to
Yeah.
them, and then I think, actually, I might be wrong there. That
Yeah.
approach might not be the best approach. Or, for instance, I'm all over the place on chatbot personality,
Yeah.
on how much time and effort should be put into the persona.
Mm.
Uh, and I'm backwards and forth on that. People are always changing my mind one way or the other. Um,
Yeah.
I'm never steady on that one.
Yeah, same here. I've been all over the place with that one. I've been, giving talks and stuff like that where I'm vouching for it, like it's unavoidable. I've worked with clients, which is like you have to do it, and then I kind of at one point, probably middle of last year, I think it might have been. I kind of thought to myself, is this even needed?
Yeah,
Like, what if you just didn't put any effort into it whatsoever? And I started to read a lot about like other people's perceptions on personality design and persona design. And it's like a lot of it is basically taken from I can't remember the books escaped me now, but it's what's the book called? I forget the name of it. Anyway, there's this book that I can't remember the name of it. That kind of has a bunch of research in there, which is that the sound of a voice can you can't help but draw a bunch of conclusions about who's speaking and stuff like that. And if you don't, I know Kathy Pearl is kind of really big on sort of like if you don't design the personality, then the people who uh, interact with it will then just decide for themselves. And I got really sort of into like trying to dig out all this theory, and I kind of thought to myself like, well, what happens if you just didn't do any of that? Like, what would be the actual impact? And then I've kind of come back around to it again. It's like, well, with voice, you absolutely are making an impact on how people perceive the audio. You can't switch your ears off, and you can't help but make a kind of decision about who's speaking. And again, I'm all over, and we're kind of doing we're doing something right now, which hopefully we'll be able to publish more about in the new year with a retailer in the UK, which is all about proving the value of that. So
mm,
hopefully, if we can publish it, maybe end of the first quarter, we might be able to say definitively, in this case, this is the actual benefit of doing it or not.
Yeah,
Which,
there
you
are,
know,
and customers do ask me, where's the data to prove otherwise, doesn't it?
that's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
For me, sometimes I think it's really frivolous and a waste of a client's hard-earned cash. Other times I think it's critical to brand. I think voice is very different to kind of chat experiences. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I'm doing a live on Friday where I'm actually doing a bit on personality. So Juji as a chatbot platform has a cognitive engine. So
Mm,
it can ask you a bit about your interests and your hobbies and your work and stuff like that. And from that, it can build a personality profile for you.
right.
And it can actually show that to the customer or not. And
Mm-hmm.
it needs, I think, slightly more than 50 words
Mm-hmm.
over two questions, so 100 words. And once it's got that, it's able to build a pretty accurate personality profile based on the big five.
Mm,
And then, once you know that profile, you can respond in a certain voice. So you
right.
build the response, and it says if this person is like, I don't know, a thinker, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at those personality types,
Yeah,
thinker,
yeah.
doer, all those, you can respond very, very differently. And then that
Mm,
makes me think that actually building some personality in is really important
yeah.
for personalized conversations. I don't know. I like you.
Yeah.
I flip flop all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, in that instance, again, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just, does it make
Does
a
it
difference?
matter?
Yeah, that's it. Do you know Brian Romilly? Have you come across Brian Romilly?
I don't recognize it.
So he's a really interesting guy. If you go back and listen to some podcasts from like maybe like This Week in Voice, I think from like 2019, 2018, perhaps, he's on there quite a lot, and I think he's very much involved in crypto and stuff now. But I believe, I could be speaking incorrectly, but I believe he's the one of the people that coined the term voice first
Yeah,
for like voice assistants and stuff. And anyway, I always remember this thing that he mentioned on one of these podcasts I caught him on years ago, which was that he was saying that for voice assistants, what they should be doing is understanding that personality profile, the Myers Briggs kind of personality
yeah, yeah.
sort of persona, and then interacting with you accordingly. So if you're the kind of person that just wants to cut to the chase and doesn't really care about detail, then it should just tell you that I'm redirecting you because there's traffic, and in order to get to work on time, we're gonna go somewhere else.
Yes.
If you're the kind of person that really likes detail and a bit more analytical and really wants things explained properly, then maybe it should say a bit more information about the fact that there's an accident, there's been three cars involved. If we go that way, it's going to take X amount longer, and going this way is going to be a bit better. If you're the kind of person that wants to have things confirmed, is that okay with you? Should we do that? Yes, do that. And so he kind of give this vision of how what you've just described,
Yes.
seemingly now it's beginning to manifest, but like back then it was just a complete sort of like brain fart. And at the time, I remember thinking that would be really, really good.
I
And
think,
I think it is good. It's impressive. It's just that the question still remains, doesn't it, about the impact it has?
we know that the future of conversational AI is voice. It really is.
Mm,
We're, like Star Trek have computer, do this, tell me that, da da da. That is the future we're heading to. Everybody will have their own digital concierge, digital assistant. It will understand your personality. It will understand your likes and dislikes, and it will treat you the way. I was going to say treat you the way a wife would treat you. No, it will treat you the way.
let's not go near that.
Yeah, it'll treat you the way that somebody who really understands you at a fundamental level would treat you. So
Mm,
for me, I'm not detail orientated. I don't like friction. If I was going to book an Airbnb, even using the Airbnb website gets me annoyed. I just
yeah.
want a digital concierge. I want to say, Jeff, can you just go and check Airbnb? I want to spend a week here. Nothing too flash, but it must have a bath, and I want it, within at least 10 minutes of the beach. If it's under 200 quid, just book it. That's what
Mm,
I want.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where voices go. I think that's the future for all of us. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be very personalized, voice-driven assistant.
Mm. That could have been what Alexa, or maybe still could be what Alexa could be. It's just very, very difficult to do that. as
It is,
Amazon
yeah.
has found and Siri has found and Viv has found. It's very difficult to do, yeah. But I still subscribe to that. To be honest, I think what may happen is that I fundamentally believe I've still got reservations about large language models in its totality, but when I look at things like ChatGPT,
Mm,
I can see OpenAI in the next 5 to 10 years maybe being the most disruptive company ever because it will disrupt Amazon entirely because
cool.
Alexa will be completely useless if ChatGPT ends up becoming something that you can put onto a device or into a phone or into a watch or into some headphones and stick a voice user interface on the top of it. Alexa would just be completely redundant.
Yeah,
Google Assistant obviously would be redundant. Google Assistant's been made redundant in many places already. And it would begin to make Google's search for certain use cases become questionable. And so that future, I'm thinking about it now and look at the industry. I think, well, Google's pulling back, Amazon seemingly is pulling back a little bit. Apple have just been consistently maintaining their current scope,
yeah,
don't have the funding or the breadth to compete. Samsung, God knows what they that's the biggest wasted opportunity of this technology I've seen so
yeah.
far. And it's like it's all kind of petering down a bit. It seems to me as though it's gone through the hype cycle. It's now in the trough of disillusionment,
Correct.
and something is going to pull it back up that slope. And I think it could be OpenAI.
But OpenAI could be the engine behind all of those digital assistants.
It
So
could be,
yeah, that is
yeah,
that was my thoughts that they would just have an amazing API and basically all of those assistants that are already out there on devices would just plug in. But you
mm,
could be right, they could be the next Apple. They could
yeah,
launch a voice-driven AI that is super personalized, super intelligent. Um, yeah, who knows? You know, I've been playing around with it recently and I'm thoroughly impressed. I can see how weak it is, but it just gives
mm.
you a little taste, just a little sniff of the future.
Like all good drug dealers.
Yes,
Enough of a taste to keep you coming back for more.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It all depends on their strategy, you know. I mean, the thing would be is that if they have this API that they just open up, then basically everyone would just use it, and then it becomes the value of it becomes commoditized.
Yep,
A little bit like the value of NLU is it will definitely become commoditized in the next few years. The
yep,
value isn't in the NLU; it's in how you apply it, the use cases you apply it to, how you design it, etc., how it integrates into your full service.
yes,
Um, but it depends on what they want to do. They because they've now got a bit of traction, it could be that if they have an approach which is the opposite of Google and Amazon and Apple, which is their approach is very much a closed ecosystem.
yep,
If OpenAI have a bit more of an open ecosystem, not to the point where you can see inside the black box necessarily, because I don't think many people even understand it anyway, but open enough to be able to allow you to plug certain things into it and control certain information that, for example, if you're Coca-Cola, it's in everybody's interest for the information that it speaks about Coca-Cola to be kind of accurate,
yes,
you know? And it's the same for most brands. So it's like if they were able to give you some degree of influence over what's in there and figure out how you handle fulfillment, which I think they will do. Sam Altman alluded to the fact that
yep,
fulfillment will be coming at some point in the future. If they can do that, it makes perfect sense for that then to be that assistant that is what Alexa could have been if it was a bit more open, a bit more collaborative, and a bit more sort of thinking very long term rather than trying to control everything.
yeah. But then the other way is Apple just dig deep into their pockets and just buy OpenAI, and then Siri
Yeah,
is the de facto choice, and more
yeah,
devices are sold,
yeah, yeah. That would be interesting.
wouldn't it?
That would be very interesting. Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah,
I you know
yeah,
what? It would tip the whole market on its head.
yeah,
Oh my, I could just see Google just crying, crying into
yeah. Oh, Google could, but I know they've got Lambda, which they're very hesitant to release. It's supposed
yeah,
to be pretty good, but like they could buy OpenAI. But it's the only thing that annoys me a little bit about acquisitions is that from my personal point of view, I love this technology. I absolutely think it is 100% the future. I know lots of people that are building these companies and building this technology, and I love them all, and I love everyone who's involved in this whole community, and I want to see all of that stuff be really successful in its own right. And it kind of, a little part of me dies a little bit when I see a good company get acquired by another company, because I
Yeah,
think, oh, they could have been fantastic, you
yeah,
know. You see
yeah,
Botmock get acquired by Walmart, and you think,
yeah.
ah, that's it's nice for Walmart. It's great for Botmock. I'm sure they all did really well out of it. And I'm not just talking about that specific instance. There's been lots of instances of these acquisitions, but a little part of me just dies inside because I'd really want these independents to be really successful. You know.
Yeah, but it's hard for them. It
I
takes
know.
a lot of drive and a lot of energy, and it tires them out. So I kind of understand why they sell. But Apple didn't sell,
No.
Microsoft didn't sell,
Yeah.
Facebook didn't sell, Instagram
Exactly.
did. Instagram did, and it's worse for it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is challenging, and I suppose because you know some of these people at a more personal level, you want them to be the next big company and follow
Yeah.
their journey and almost be a part of it. So yeah, I get
Mm.
it.
Yeah, nice. Cool, nice one. Well, Jim, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been really, really interesting. I'm so, so appreciative of you making the time. Thank you so much. I will put those links into the show notes, the posts that mention those books. I will put you mentioned the Bottrepreneurs earlier, and we didn't really get a
Yes,
chance to speak about that, but I'll put the links to the Bottrepreneurs stuff in
thank you.
there. Your ebook as well, which I've downloaded, it's really good. I'll stick that in there. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Keep up the good work. I'm probably your most reliable viewer.
Nice one. I appreciate that. Nice one. Appreciate it, Jim. Have a very Merry Christmas, and everybody else have a Merry Christmas. Hopefully, I will see you actually, because we're doing another one with Sonia Talati from GoDaddy tomorrow, similar kind of time, same bat channel. So hopefully, we'll see you on that one as the final VUX World podcast before Christmas. Have a very good day and week, and thank you again, Jim, and we'll speak very soon.
All right, take care.
Cheers.